Of all the books that I've read in 2025, here are my number one recommendations. I know, it's February and this is a bit overdue. Life has just been a little bit busy, but I could not skip sharing these. These are the books that I have been recommending to people, especially if you don't read a lot, so you don't want to like waste your time with a book you may or may not like. These are the books that I highly, highly recommend for the best time within each genre that I read. But anyways, let's get into it. Now, I dabble with a lot of different genres. My bread and butter is definitely fantasy and historical fictions. However, for my average reader who just wants to pick up a good book, this was definitely my number one recommendation. That is The Wedding People by Alison Espach. It's definitely got some dark humor in here, and it follows a middle-aged woman going through a divorce. I loved this book. I have not laughed so much in my entire life while reading a book, and it was very unexpected. I had no expectations going into this book, and it ends up being one of my favorite to recommend to people. Now, if you're looking for a good thriller, I don't read a lot of thrillers. However, I found one that I am obsessed with, and I think a lot of people who are into thrillers are obsessed with this book as well, but that is Pretty Girls by Karin. I don't want to give anything away, but this book made me lose faith in all men. Historical fictions was my most difficult to pick a favorite for. However, I would have to say my favorite historical fiction last year was definitely The Frozen River by Ariel Lawhon. This book was incredible. There's also like kind of like a little bit of mystery and like thriller elements to it, so this was really, really good. I do, however, have to give an honorable mention to historical fictions too. Atmosphere by Jenkins. This was one of the last books I read last year, and my mind was blown. The first chapter of this, I was glued to the pages. I also have to give an honorable mention to The Four Winds by Kristin. This book taught me so much while also telling a very compelling story. I love this book, and I do think this is one of her most underrated books. For romance, I'm gonna be honest with you, 2025 was the year I found out that I'm not really that into strictly romance books. I read quite a few. There wasn't any I particularly loved. However, I did really, really enjoy The Last Letter by Rebecca Yarros. I cried like a little baby while reading this. However, 2025 was also the year I found out that I like dark romance. And this one was really hard to decide, but I have to choose Nocticadia by Keri. There is some suspended reality in this, so you could say it's a little bit of fantasy, but this book, Dr. Death, I do also have to give a shout out to God of Fury by Rina. This is within her Legacy of God series. Now, technically, you don't need to read all the books prior to that. And honestly, a lot of the books prior to that, I was like iffy on. However, to have the best emotional impact for God of Fury, you need to read the prior books. If you're a fan of MM romance, especially with Heated Rivalry being out, but you just want it a little darker and twisty and less hockey, this book is fantastic. Now for sci-fi, I didn't read a lot of sci-fi if I'm being completely honest with you. However, James Islington Hierarchy series, I read both of these last year. There's definitely elements of sci-fi, especially in the first book. I am obsessed with this series. If you like fantasy with a lot of depth, this is the book for you. This is not a casual read. This is get your highlighters out, add your annotations, keep track of everything. This series is wild. For my favorite fantasy series, hands down, no questions asked, is the Poppy War Trilogy. Every single one of these books was a masterpiece. This is the first series since Throne of Glass that truly gave me that feeling of, oh my gosh, I'm obsessed with this series. I'm obsessed with these books. And it was just a high I was chasing on with this series. I 100% recommend. I also love that there's like a historical fiction element to this. However, the series is not for the faint of heart. Please check your trigger warnings. Now for my favorite romantasy, I'd have to say Once Upon a Broken Heart. This trilogy was so cute and whimsical. It's exactly what I needed. I read this directly after the Poppy War Trilogy, and the contrast between the two of them was chef's kiss. While Poppy War Trilogy definitely dug a hole in my heart, Once Upon a Broken Heart actually fixed my heart. Last, but certainly not least, my favorite dark romantasy, and arguably could be one of my favorite fantasy. Honestly, between this and the Poppy War Trilogy, I was having such a hard time deciding between them. The Eating With series by Keri. There's only 2 books out so far. I am obsessed with this series. I think about the morning, noon, and night, especially Zavander at night. He haunts my dreams. I cannot wait for the 3rd book to come out. When the 3rd book comes out, that is my most anticipated release of 2026. Hopefully it comes out in 2026. Coming out of 2025, these are my favorite books to recommend. There's so many others I also love to recommend, but if I had to choose, these would be my top 2025 books. Toodaloo.